Building new stag pens. This is a slightly different version of what I have made in the past. The first piece I'm going to make is the back. I've already pre-cut the boards. I'll tell you the dimensions as I go. This piece is the back. All your uprights are 48 inches high, and to make the back so that it's flush like this, you want your top and bottom piece to be 42 inches. When you are screwing it together, all you have to do is take a couple pieces of cut 2x4 and lay under the top and bottom board to help you with getting this nice and flat, or as flat as possible, this direction and this direction. For your next step, measure across the top from outside in to 24 inches. You're going to start 2 screws, and you're going to put in your center roof support, which is 45 inches. How it's sitting right now is basically how I screw it together. I just kind of get it to where it's nice and flush against itself here and here, and I drive the screws home. Once you've got your center brace board in for the roof, it's time to do the front part of the pen. Now on the back, you want things flush, but on the front you're actually going to create an overhang so that when you're finished you'll have a flush edge. And the easiest way to do that, just take another 2x4 piece, put it up against here like this, and then you're going to slide this piece over. You want it flush at the top and flush with this piece of 2x4. Alright, to make your front panel, you're going to need 4 pieces at 48 inches by 48 inches. So your uprights are 48 inches, and then your top and bottom are 48 inches. And you're going to hang it over again the width of a 2x4. So that's your finished front panel. And again, on the top you're going to measure in 2 feet and make a mark. Start 2 screws, and then you'll attach your upright or your center roof support. Just a little comment about using the wood block as a spacer. Anytime you can do things like that, it increases your productivity, because every time you have to whip out your tape measure and make a mark, and you're just wasting time. So you know the end result is going to call for the thickness of a 2x4, so just take a chunk of 2x4 you already cut, slap it up there, use it as a spacer, and off you go. Now that you've got your front and back panels attached, it should look like this. And as far as getting the basic frame together, the only thing left is put your side supports on, your top and bottom side supports. Those will be 46.5 inches, and you're going to need 4 of them. The reason it's 46 is because you're going to be flat up against here and flat up against the inside of here. That's why we had to put this spacer. The reason I did this is because I want the back panel of the pen to be as flat as possible for the plywood, and the same with the top. But I've got a little more leeway out in the front with the wire, and I felt that doing this would give a little more structural strength, because it's, how do you want to say, it's basically putting the pressure points, I guess you could say, into different directions, and it's giving me an opportunity to actually doubly secure this corner. So I'm getting my strength from the plywood in the back, but up here I'm able to put screws in this way and this way, since it's only the wire that's up here. When I'm putting the side pieces on, I usually put the top 2 on first, or rather I put the top 2 on first while it's standing upright. Then I flip it over on its side and put the bottom ones on. This allows me to see if I'm flush on the bottom, and also get everything squared up on the corners. So far, that's all there is to this frame. And from there, you know, you can go however you want with it. I'm going to put a door on it. You don't have to. And I'm going to do a solid plywood back and a solid plywood top. Again, you don't have to. Some people just do tarps. I'm also going to put a roost in it. Now, a lot of people just run a wood bar through the wire from side to side. Problem I have with that is birds have a tendency, in my opinion, to want to roost up against the edge when they're first figuring out the pen, and then there's nothing stopping something from reaching in and grabbing them. So my roosts are dead center of the back wall and come out from the back wall, so they don't make any contact with the sides whatsoever, and the only thing they're making contact with is solid. In regards to all the nails, they're just going to get pounded in by Carolina because it's used lumber, and the plywood that I bought is not treated, even though these 2x4s are, because quite frankly I can't afford to buy that much treated plywood. It's ridiculously priced, and I'm just going to treat it like I do all the other plywood I do around here. And the last set of pens I built, like these, I built in probably around 2006, and there's several of them that they're basically shot. I mean, but for the most part, there's still, the majority of them are still useful, and I didn't use any treated lumber on them. And half of their construction was done using pallet boards. So the fact that I'm using treated 2x4s for my frame, I expect these to live a lot longer. And in the end, if I have to change out the plywood, it's better than having to rip out half of the frame and rebuild it, which I've done on some of the old ones. The door that I'm going to make is going to be made out of cedar fence picket because I have it available to me from my old job until my supply runs out that I stockpiled. So that's what I'm going to make, and I don't know if I'll get to that yet today, but this is where I'm at with it so far. So far, to build one of these pens without the door, I'll figure out the wood for the door later. But to build one of these, here's what you're going to need. One full sheet of plywood. You're going to need 4 pieces of 2x4 cut at 46.5 inches, 2 pieces cut at 42 inches, 1 piece cut at 45 inches, and 6 pieces cut at 48 inches. So, you know, whatever that works out to be, your smartest bet would be to go buy 8-foot 2x4s and break them down from there. When it comes time to put the plywood on, you're going to cut it into 2 equal 4-foot by 4-foot squares. And you're going to want to put your back piece on first across the top. You're going to want it flush on the outside here and flush with the top of the 2x4. Alright, put those screws in. Don't worry about the rest of the back just yet. Next step is to put your top piece of plywood on. You're going to want to hang this back over the back plywood. Reason being is this is your end grain and it's sitting straight up, which means it's more liable to soak up rainwater. So by putting this over it, it helps to reduce that. Obviously it's not completely perfect with this one, whatever. Once you've got this line screwed in, you're going to come down one side to the corner and flush it up over here. Get that piece in, screwed all the way across. Then you're able to finish screwing the 2 remaining outside edges and down the center. Once you've done that, you can then flip this over and now you're able to screw on the rest of your back piece. Once we've got the basic frame put together, you can start staining it, which she's doing during the day, and then I'm coming home and doing the more technical stuff. So I just got done making these doors and framing them, so I'll go over that. The door itself is 20 inches wide from outside to outside and 32 inches tall from outside to outside. The long sections are fence picket ripped down the middle, and I left the top sections the full width of the picket for added structural stability. This board here again is a fence picket ripped in half, and the bottom one is full width. The reason I made the door 20 inches instead of 24 like I did on the old ones is because I have a bunch of these 2-foot long fence picket pieces, and by making a 20-inch door it allows me to utilize it for the bottom. Now this door will only swing out like that, and I will put a hasp on it to latch it. The reason for the board down here is so I have something to staple my fencing to, because I will basically wrap the entire frame with the fencing and then cut the door out, so I'll need to be able to secure it along here. I do plan to still put my license plates on there, just to block out and keep them from reaching around the corners at each other. And I still have to put the roosts in, which will be the next step for me. When you put your boards in, you got to kind of pay attention to how everything is oriented. So this board is actually screwed to the back side of the 2x4s, whereas this board is screwed to the outside of this one and the outside of this 2x4. And the reason for that is when this door is closed, then it's a nice flat closure without a gap at the top or bottom. You also got to take into consideration that wood swells, and so you leave a little bit of a gap in between the top of your frame and the top of the door. Same here and down at the bottom. To construct the roost, I'm doing something a little different. Last time I used 2x4s, but this time I've got a bunch of really short pieces of 2x6, so I'm going to rip those 2x6s in half lengthwise. It's going to make it a little narrower than a 2x4. And those pieces happen to be about 22 inches, so I made the roost 11 inches. Now, to figure out how to cut the angle, I'm not a math whiz, so I got to eyeball stuff. What I did is I set my roost board up on top of the roof of the pen. I got me a square, and I brought it up to square. Then I took this board, which is going to be my brace, and I overlapped it to the roost board, and I drew a line on it, and that cut my angle. Then I screwed it into the other piece. Once I did that, I held it back against the square and made a mark of where this board met the top of the plywood. Then I laid it down. I took this piece of scrap board and I just lined it up and made me another mark, And now I have my angle for the back piece of this support board. Once I've got this one cut, I can use it to set the angle on my table saw or my circular saw. You can do it on either one to cut the remaining pieces identically. So then when it's all said and done, it's going to sit like that in the middle of the back wall. For the wire, I'm using 2x4 wire that is 4 foot tall, and my unit of measurement is just these squares. Now you want your solid vertical, and you don't want a half of one. Let me show you the other side. You don't count that, okay, because you're going to cut those off. So you just count out 69 of these squares and cut your wire off the roll. I start on the back side here, staple it top and bottom about midway of the 2x4. Do the same at the corner, and then you just take your hand and bend it around the corner. Do the same over here, and then when you get over to this side, staple it at the upright that your door latch is going on, because you're going to cut the wire here and down here. You will then take that piece and use it for the door, and you're actually going to end up cutting a whole row off of it when you're all said and done, so that it's not overhanging. Once you've got it tacked up, you can go in and put the rest of your staples in. And these are the staples that I use when I'm making my pens. They hold a lot better than something out of a staple gun, I can tell you that. For the latch, I'm using my hasps that I like to use. And you'll notice I put it under the wire. It'll be flush against the wood a little better like that. Just something else I'd like to cover. The reason why I have my doors swing out is because, of course, they're designed for stags. Now, if you've got birds that are fresh off the range and haven't been handled, they're going to be flighty at first till you start working with them, and they're going to be bouncing around in here. And if you have a door that swings in, number one, it's probably going to hit the roost, so you're not going to be able to get in there all the way. Number two, if a bird is flying towards the door and you have to pull the door towards you, you are effectively scooping the bird out of the pen with it. Whereas if the bird's flying towards the door and the door swings in, you can stop them. To mount the roost, what you do is you measure 18 inches down from the top of the back piece of plywood on the outside. So from here down 18 inches, and then 2 foot in so it's centered, and then you drive your screws in for the top piece, and then you'll be able to drive your screws in for the bottom of the brace if you've already got it put together. You will need someone to help you hold it in place though. Hopefully these roosts work out good because they're a lot smaller than what I've made in the past. But if they don't work, it's not going to be that difficult to change out the top board, because all I got to do is take out the back 2 screws and the 2 screws here. The final step is to put the license plates on, and I use those to basically keep the birds from reaching around the corner at each other. Of course, having the overhang of the plywood here, 1.5 inches, helps as well. But I do one this direction on the door side, and I do one the opposite direction on the other side. And when you put them in a line like this, it keeps them from reaching around and getting at each other. I don't know if you guys remember these two, but the first one is that little Griffin claret that I bought earlier this year. And this one is the pumpkin claret cross that I bought. The other 3 pens I'm going to leave open for now and not put anything in them, because I don't know which stags are going to need penning next, and I try to let them run together as much as possible. And my other project for today, now that I've got this done, is to keep working on the pheasant pens. You saw them early on, but I got quite a ways with them here a week or 2 ago. So I got my wood along the bottom here, tin on the insides. The doors, I wanted to keep the same amount of solid material along the bottom, but to help her get in and out of the pens, I lowered it by a foot. And this part I'm pretty excited about. I found out about these types of gate latches when I used to install fence for a living. So I got to put wire on the doors yet here. But the nice thing about it is it latches itself, and I can open it from either side. So I'm going to do that all the way through these runs. I've got my tin over the walkway, and I've got to lace this wire together yet and put in my solid dividers on these 2 doors, wire the doors, and put in my solid plywood doors that will eventually lead to the shed. Those ones I'm just going to go to the top of the bottom 2x4 here. I wanted them to swing out, but I kind of wasn't thinking when I hinged these doors. So I'm probably gonna have to make them swing in, but that won't be that big of a deal, honestly. And I still haven't made up my mind if I'm gonna do them so that they come out 10 feet or 8 feet. But I've decided that I don't want to have a super low back wall, so I'm probably going to do a pitched roof where the majority of it comes up at this angle and then a little bit of it comes up this direction, so that I can walk around in there and not whack my head. That's basically all that amounts to. So anyway, I'm also putting some pieces of some pine tree in here for the pheasants. I want to make these a little nicer since they're along my driveway and fancier looking. And basically, I didn't know it at the time, but all the really cool pine trees that were in our yard when we moved in were infested with pine beetles, and they're all dead now. So as I cut them down, I'm picking out cool looking branches, and they're going to end up in pens. But I hope that gives you a good idea on how to build these stag pens. They're not cheap, they're not light, but they're going to last you a long time. And if you live in the winter snow country like I do, you're going to be glad you made them this way. So thanks for watching.